But we thought it'd be helpful to start by learning a bit more about the person who developed this way of praying. He was called St. Ignatius of Loyola. One or two St. Bede's people might have heard me talk about him before. I don't know about you, but when we sometimes think about saints, we tend to think about maybe people who are divorced from the world, people who'd led quiet lives, very holy lives. And St. Ignatius wasn't like that really at all. He lived at a time of great turmoil, born at the end of the 15th century, lived through that great period when the New World was being discovered, when the Reformation was happening, and there's a lot of political turmoil. And he was born in what we now call Spain. I'll just tell you a little bit about his life. He was the youngest of a family of 13, born in the Basque region of northern Spain. And when he was 14, he was sent away to train as a royal page to the King of Spain, was introduced to the ideals of chivalry and knightly service. And we're told that as he grew older, he developed quite an interest in women. His father wanted him to be a priest, but we believe, we're told by his contemporaries, that his character didn't seem compatible with being a priest. In due course, his service of those in power and authority led him to become a kind of soldier, if you like. And there was a memorable time in a place called Pamplona when he was commanding a company defending the fortress against a French invasion. The defense had become futile and defeat was a certainty, but Ignatius was stubborn to the limits and refused to surrender. The price of that resistance came in the form of a cannonball, which shattered his leg and broke his right knee. His days as a soldier ended on a stretcher, and it must have seemed to Ignatius like the end of the line. And maybe most of us can identify with things that have seemed like the end of the line for us, or the end of a chapter, times when our hopes and dreams have been shattered. He took some time to recover, as you can imagine, from a shattered leg. And to pass the time, he wanted something to read. He wanted some kind of great tales of chivalry to read. But the only books that there were in the castle where he was recovering was A Life of Christ and A Life of the Saints. Wasn't quite what Ignatius had thought he was going to be reading during his convalescence. But he spent that time reading and daydreaming. And he indulged in what have been called two different kinds of dreaming really. On the one hand, he still dreamed about military battles, the battles he would command, the glories that he would achieve, the noble ladies he would win. But those were dreams of what might have been. And though they raised his spirits for a while, they left him in the longer term feeling flat and empty. But reading those books he was given, The Life of Christ and Life of the Saints, he started to dream of something else, started to dream about a king whose service was more desirable than that of the King of Spain. And he began to wonder how this Christ king might be served. And he dreamt of that. They were still daydreams, if you like, but he noticed an important difference in the after effects. These dreams left him feeling inspired, energized, and eager. He discovered, if you like, the true meaning of his life. He found what gave him life. He found where God was leading him. And as he lay there in that enforced convalescence, he learned how to notice his feelings and moods and reactions. He listened to an invitation coming from deep within inside himself. when he'd recovered, he went off to various places. He went to a famous abbey just outside Barcelona, the Abbey of Montserrat, um, and decided he needed a fresh start. One of the ways he did that was by making his confession. And again, we're told that his confession is said to have taken him the whole of 3 days to make. Quite a life he must have lived. And then he went to settle in a nearby town where he spent more time in prayer, but not just withdrawing from the world. It was very much serving those around him, serving those in need, and developing what he went on to call his spiritual exercises, which were these ways of praying that Ignatius developed. Those spiritual exercises have become a great guiding force for a lot of people, right down to the present day. And Ignatius later went on to form what became known as the Jesuits. Probably the most famous contemporary Jesuit nowadays is Pope Francis. And the Jesuits have exerted great influence on spiritual lives of a lot of people from different denominations, not just Roman Catholics, but Anglicans, Methodists, and all sorts of different denominations. And his ways of praying were developed during that time and have still been found to be really helpful by people even today. And it's one of those ways of praying that we're going to explore in the next few weeks. That's a bit about his life. Those ways of praying as you might have guessed from what I've said about him, they're not ways of praying that ask us to kind of withdraw from the world. They're ways of praying that take seriously our experience, that ask us to trust what we experience each day and to be able to come to see God at work in our experience. It says something about how precious we are as human beings, that God comes to us in our human experience. So that's the first thing. It's about encountering God in our experience. The second thing is that it's all for the greater glory of God. Ignatius came to leave behind ideas of his own glory and wanted to do everything for the glory of God. The third thing about this spirituality is that it's in and for the world. It's not out of the world. Ignatius didn't withdraw from everyday reality. He lived it and lived out his calling in that. The fourth thing is that he had this sense of kind of ongoing conversion, if you like. Perhaps if we hear the word conversion, we've been trained to think of it as something kind of dramatic and one-off. But Ignatius saw that actually our conversion was about a day-by-day experience. Those of you who heard my sermon on Sunday heard me talking about turning or returning to God each day. And in a way, that's what Ignatius believed in, that we could turn around each day, not just once and for all. The fifth thing was that it was very much about being set within the church. Ignatius saw that the church has its failings, and some of us see that the church has its failings too, but he saw his life to be lived within church and for the benefit of the church's future. And then the last thing really is that his ways of praying were about prayer that kind of permeates our daily life. So he approached prayer in different ways. So not just thinking, but also imagining, using our senses. And he would say, probably as people have said since, pray as you can, not as you can't. Find the way of praying that works for you and go with it. And alongside with that was that it's about the ordinary. It's about what happens to us day by day, not about trying to achieve some great heights of spiritual perfection. It's about living the here and now and seeing where God is at work in the here and now. So that's just a little bit about Ignatius. And actually later on, we must remember to mention, Catherine, wasn't it, the website that you've created And there are a couple of other little videos about Ignatius that we'll put on there as well. But that just gives us a sense about who he was and the kind of colourful character that we're walking the steps of in these few weeks.